It's the Blue Vote Cafe, a little bit wonkish, a whole lot of fun. I'm David Schellenberg again, along with me, Rachel Oyster. Hello, Rachel.
Hi, David.
Co-chairs for Democrats Abroad in Canada's capital region here in Ottawa. Rachel, it's winter in Ottawa. It's beautiful.
It is beautiful, actually. I wasn't sure where you were going with that. It's winter in Ottawa. And some people are like, where's spring? But others are out there enjoying the snow and the ice.
Well, one of the nice things about Ottawa I always find is we do have sort of the Disney seasons. Like winter is dark and cold and very snowy, and there's people ice skating all over the place, and spring will come along and little flowers, tulips will pop up all over the city. Then summer will be nice and hot, and fall has, of course, the beautiful maple leaves, and it is truly one of the changes of the season. For me, is one of the things I love about this city.
I've never thought about it as the Disney World of seasons, but you're absolutely right. It is. Yes,
you think of people who live in places where it's like hottish and coolish, and like, you have no idea how it is. And there's something about this stretch of winter in a stretch where time just seems to have stopped. It's like I get the feeling we are moving forward. Things are happening.
Yeah, you're right. Wow. Yeah, no, we have the quintessential seasons, and apparently the widest temperature range of any national capital.
Well, yay us. Who's with us today, Rachel?
Well, today we begin, they're already laughing. Welcome, ladies. Today we begin an exploration of Democrats Abroad's global caucuses, something we haven't really looked at before. And we are kicking this off with the Global Women's Caucus. So today we welcome the co-chairs, Anne Hesse and Christina Skovsgaard. Hello, ladies.
Hi, I'm Anne Hesse, and I chair the Global Women's Caucus, and I'm so glad to be here with you all today. It's really exciting, and I've already learned so much about Canada and your seasons. where I live in Germany, and so our seasons aren't so lovely the way you described it. I'm really envious, but we have snow too. So
yeah, well, you'll just have to come visit us sometime in the winter and skate on the Rideau Canal.
And hello, Christina.
Yeah, hello. I'm Christina Skovsgaard, and I live in Oslo, Norway, where we certainly do have winter. But
yes, you do.
I know, but it's getting better because it's almost 3 hours lighter than it was during the winter equinox. So it has really improved. So and my position on the Global Women's Caucus is to, as a volunteer coordinator. So my job is to find the volunteers in this 100% volunteer organization.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, I called you co-chair, so that's incorrect. Anne is the chair, and you are the volunteer coordinator.
Correct.
Wonderful. So before we plunge into the Women's Caucus, we like to ask our guests, what states do you vote out of?
Anne?
I'm a Californian. I'm a homesick San Franciscan. I know when you were talking about 4 seasons, I thought, California is one of those places where we basically just have 2.
So the questions are where did you grow up? Where do you vote out of? Where do you live now? So you've almost covered it.
Yeah, but what might be interesting to some of your listeners, I grew up in the San Francisco area, but since I've been in Germany, I live in near Stuttgart, my family moved, but I still get to vote there because that's where I'm registered. So even though I haven't been home for years and years and years, and I never really lived at that address, I get to vote from there. So
that's interesting.
A lot of people are not sure about whether they can do that, but yep, you can.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, that's great. And Christina, what about you?
Yeah, I vote in the very important swing state of Ohio. I'm just across the lake from you guys, so was stationed in Cleveland most of my life, from the age of 8 until I went to college, and moved back there after college for a while before I moved to Norway. So it's kind of called sometimes the mistake on the lake, but I think that's Cleveland has a reputation that it doesn't deserve. It's really a very culturally rich city. They're also known for the river that burned, but they turned that into something good because they made a beer called Burning River, and it's won all kinds of awards.
Oh, that's great. I've actually heard that about Cleveland, like Baltimore, which is one of my several hometowns. It's a fabulous city that nobody knows. That's the truth. So I think Cleveland may be the same. Yeah.
So, Anne, how did you end up in Germany, did you say?
Yes, I'm in Germany. Well, hey, about over 20 years ago, I came to Germany on a 2-year contract with an opera company, and that 2 years grew into over 20 years because I married my conductor. Oops.
That's one way to keep having work.
Well, inevitably find as we ask these questions, it's love is why people end up in these parts of the world.
I know. I never planned on staying in Germany. I just thought, a little decoration on my resume, a little European credits on my opera career would look good, and I got stuck.
Stuck. Tell your husband you're stuck. Is that what you said?
No. I have 2 wonderful children, both born in Germany, both American citizens and voting from abroad.
Great.
Another case of Americans who are allowed to vote, even though they were not born in California. So have to keep stressing that,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's true of my younger son who was born in Ottawa, who votes out of the address that his dad and I lived at before we moved to Canada.
Yeah. Right.
And Christina, how did you end up in Norway?
Well, I'm not going to come up with an original story. I fell in front of a very cute ski instructor who was studying in Cleveland. So he picked me up. I always say he picked me up in more ways than one, and there the story goes. So I was the person that Steve Nardi was referring to when they said, well, what do you like about Norway? And the person answered, well, I like my husband. That was me.
That's a great story.
So we ended up immigrating back to Norway. Actually, we didn't. I was just telling that to Anne. We didn't really make a conscious decision. We just came here one summer and never returned.
Yeah, that happens to a lot of us too.
Right.
Interesting. All right, shall we talk about the Women's Caucus?
Yes.
Oh, please. I love it. My favorite topic.
So when there's a DA member that you think might not know anything about it, what would you say to them?
Well, a lot of people don't even know what the word caucus means. They don't even know what a caucus is.
Right.
And so I would start with saying we're a group of people who are interested in our particular issues. And I always feel like the very best starting place for the entry point for so many Democrats Abroad members is through the caucuses, because people become political because of issues that move them and not because they want to get out the vote or something like that. Right. We end up employing everybody to get out the vote at the end. You man that phone bank. But they come in because of the really pressing issues that weigh upon us, and so that's what the caucuses do. We have eight DA caucuses now, all addressing these different issues, and of course we intersect all the time. There's so many, and especially one of the reasons the Women's Caucus is the largest of our global caucuses is because there are women in every single caucus.
Right.
So there's quite a lot of intersection, and we have leaders from the other caucuses on our Global Women's Caucus Steering Committee as well. So we're all trying to be on the same page anyway. But Christina was present for the birth of the caucus. I came in a few years after the establishment of the caucus. I guess I'm the second chair or so of the group, but
the first meeting we had that I recall was in 2015, when a woman named Christine Moritz was the chair of the Global Women's Caucus. But it was just starting, and we really didn't have much of an agenda quite yet. It wasn't really until Anne took over and really organized us that we really started moving.
Were there caucuses already, or was it one of the first that was founded in DA?
It was the first global caucus. There were some small caucuses at the country level. Uh-huh. France had a women's caucus, and I think the Netherlands had an LGBT caucus, and there were a few like that. But the women led the way in creating a global caucus. And again, I think it's because, there are women, women's issues are everybody's issues. And I think that's why, and the numbers were there, the very strong numbers.
Right. So what catalyzed the formation of it, Christina? Do you remember how?
I think it was, I wasn't that active at that particular point, but I remember Christine talking an awful lot about reproductive justice and the Equal Rights Amendment. These were very big issues for her. So I think that was a catalyst for the starting of the caucuses. And
what do you know? We're still thinking about those things.
Well, that's what I was thinking too. When you say women's issues are everybody's issues, to ask a stupid question. So, what are examples of some of those issues?
Well, of course, the ERA, we have been saying for a long time that the ERA is something that is as beneficial to men as it is for women. If you have women equally pulling in salary and helping to pull the family wagon, so to speak, it's better for everybody. It's better for the men in the world, and it's better for their children. So that's definitely an issue. My husband is a big proponent of the ERA too, because he's got 2 daughters and he wants them to have equality in the world as well. So it's his issue too. Reproductive justice always involves 2. Climate is another big issue for us. We have a Women in Climate Action Team. That's everybody's problem, but of course women are affected by climate change more than others. So those are a few of the issues. Christina has her finger on the pulse of all our action teams. Maybe she can tell you about the action teams themselves.
Wonderful.
Organized at some point.
Well, the other ones that we have one called Books Abroad. So they meet once every 4 months and discuss a book regarding female literature. Our last one was Cast. So I don't know if you've heard of the book, but it was very broad, interesting. And the next and newest team that we have is Violence Against Women. And we're just starting it up. And one of the reasons we're starting that team up is because the Violence Against Women's Act, which was passed under the Clinton administration, expired. I didn't know laws could expire.
And by the way, it was written by Biden. Biden wrote it, didn't he?
Wow.
Right.
That's
I didn't know that laws could expire, but they do.
Yeah.
So, and it's hard to believe, but the people that are obstructing this is the NRA and the Republican legislatures. They do not want it to be reinstated in its full capacity. Yet women are raped every 2 minutes in the United States. There are 20,000 calls every day to domestic hotlines. And 1 in 9 children experience sexual assault at the hands of an adult.
Wow.
So this is a very, very important thing. So we have started working on this, and we're going to be looking at the bill also from the standpoint of women abroad. Because, I have a very good example of how it can affect people that live abroad. Now, this is kind of an unusual antidote. My son, when he leaves often for vacation, being a young family with quite a few children, they often rent their apartment out. So one year they rented it out to a woman in Saudi Arabia, and she was supposed to arrive, and she didn't. And I thought, I wonder what happened. So she arrives the next day, and I said, what happened to you? And she said, when I got to the airport, this is an American woman married to an American man. When she got to the airport, they would not let her board the plane without a note or permission from her husband.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So she had to go home, change her ticket, bring her husband to the airport the next day. Yeah. If she was allowed to board the plane.
Oh my!
But this is not even having to do with anything with violence. But we see that women are in precarious positions all over the world, and we want them also to be included.
How many action teams do we have, Christina, and what do they do?
We have 7 teams. The first one is communications, and their job is to help publish the newsletter and post things on Facebook. And they help us a lot with logos and making everything look nice. So they're very, very important.
Right.
Then we have the Equal Rights Amendment team. And some people were wondering, well, should we get involved in that? But we have gotten heavily involved in it because of Sherry Temple. And she's working very closely with all the legislation that's constantly being updated in the United States. So we're very engaged in that particular amendment. Then we have the reproductive justice team, who is very much looking at the abortion laws and how they are changing in some states, and how the women are being threatened. And we are also very focused on trying to make sure that contraception is available and available to young people. And then there's our climate action team, because everybody in the world has to breathe and
drink the water.
and drink water. Yeah. So, and it's important to everyone, not just women. And then we have our books abroad, who deal with feminist literature. And then we have the team that I was talking about, the Violence Against Women, which is our newest.
It's amazing.
I'd like to mention what we do. Our teams do research on these topics, and they track legislation, and we do a big educational and informational push as well for our members, so they know what's going on. And when it's necessary, we develop some activist toolkits and what I call events in the box. That is like a whole event like delivered like a pizza. The Global Women's Caucus creates these events, and so smaller caucus groups and even individual members can get together and take out the event pizza and put it in the microwave, and they've got it's an image. They can repeat this event because we're in every time zone, and it's impossible to do one event that everybody can attend. And it's wonderful to have these materials available for all our members to access, to enjoy, to elaborate on. They're welcome to upload more things for us, and they use our discussion questions, and we do teach-ins and things like that in this kind of a context. And so that's been very successful. And for Women's History Month, which is next month, we have a beautiful, wonderful team working on new materials, a whole library of materials, events on in a box, and toolkits that they'll have. So that's something we do. And of course, when the time comes, we help to get out the vote, because the bottom line on all of this is that we can't go very far without blue votes, without our people sitting in those seats in the legislature, as we can tell right now. So that's what we do. That's why we have these teams. And because there are so many issues, we've divided up the issues among these different teams. And each team is led by an expert in her field. I'm not an expert in any of these fields, to be honest. Because Rachel and I were discussing, we come from a theater background, and I see myself a little bit like the conductor. A conductor doesn't know how to play the violin, but he has an idea, and he can't play the tuba, but he knows how to pull it all together. And so even though I'm not an expert in reproductive justice or any of these things, I feel like I'm trying very hard to get the orchestra to play together.
Right.
And there's one other team, which we... which is the candidate information team, which has been very essential prior to the election. And our leader there, she contacted a lot of the women that were running in races that were not necessarily so well known. So they were congressional races primarily, and it was to make our members aware of these candidates. And they will be continuing to work with candidates coming forward.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. That was an important point in why we chose those kinds of candidates, because we felt that at the national level, the real shiny national candidates were getting enough news around them, enough press, all the women presidential candidates, for example. But we wanted to put the spotlight on more local congressional candidates, because we see how important they are. And it's something that our caucus was able to do, is to fill that gap where nobody else was having these women on a forum, on a panel discussion. We had them, and some of them won.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely something about finding the new people and giving them a little bit of publicity early on, because they do become the leaders eventually. And sometimes we spend too much time looking at the stars and not enough at the up and comers.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we have learned our lesson in years past when we don't have the depth at the state level that we needed.
For when the time comes.
Yeah.
March is Women's History Month, and you had mentioned the ERA earlier, so I guess just to follow up on that briefly, ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment, is still a proposed amendment. So when we talk about the history of women, can you give us a little bit of a history lesson on what that is and why it's so stuck?
When it was introduced, it wasn't a partisan issue. In fact, again, I'm going to refer to Christina because she's on the team. She's on the ERA team.
Perfect. Yes.
Yeah. I think Christina could give you I told you I'm not the expert.
No, you were the one that mentioned it, so that's why I asked you. But yeah,
I don't know which section to point to.
Yeah.
Exactly, Rachel. And now it's time for the ERA spring section.
Well, there are many aspects of the ERA that are very complicated. I'm not the absolute expert on it. Sherry Temple is. But at any rate, what it boils down to is that it had to pass in 37 states to make it, or 38 states to make it global, not global, national,
right,
and to put it into the Constitution. But the fact of the matter is it only passed in 37, and it's only occurred recently that it passed in several other states. And then the archivist was not willing to, the man who's supposed to write it into the Constitution, that these things passed, was unwilling to put it in there because he felt that there was a deadline. Because when they first...
so what year would that have been in?
What the deadline was back in the 80s.
Right.
So they're saying, the new people are saying that deadline is passed. There's legislation in the Congress saying that we should disregard the deadline. That really wasn't an important point.
Right.
Number one, that was just an artificially placed there. So now we have gotten 38 states that have actually voted to put the Equal Rights Amendment in their Constitution. So now we have to get into the federal Constitution.
Yeah.
So that's at the stage we are right now.
Are there also states trying to backtrack on having approved it as well?
Well, there were several states that actually, I don't have my notes in front of me, but there were several states that actually said, "Oh no, we're going to rescind it."
Yes,
no, but they weren't allowed to do that. Apparently, you can't rescind a vote. No.
Cool. Okay.
So the Equal Rights Amendment right now has been passed in 38 states. We're waiting for that archivist to either be replaced or, right. That's a possibility.
Yes, I agree.
It could happen. It could happen. Biden's working real fast. He's
right. So
cleaning house.
He is.
So it can get into the Constitution. Exactly. And we're still working on trying to get the other states like South Carolina and North Carolina. North Carolina to pass it. So there are still several states that have not passed it, mostly the southern states.
Right.
I would interject that in order to try to make this happen, as I said, we were looking for our candidate information panel discussions, our Zoom discussions. We were looking at state level, and we identified Arizona as one of those states that could pass the ERA if they had the legislature turn blue. And so we invited every single blue woman candidate from Arizona onto a panel discussion. Unfortunately, it didn't work. A lot of them came very close, but that's the kind of connection between our issue and what we do about it.
Right.
We had this issue and we tried to make it happen. We tried to make movement at the state level in the legislature there so that it would happen. But we're not done yet. We're just starting.
Well, and one of the magic things about Democrats Abroad is that we touch all the states.
It's wonderful. Yeah. And we then, of course, we have on occasion sent our calls to action to specific members, our members of the Women's Caucus who vote in this or that state. Arizona women were especially alerted to this discussion, and when it comes to some of our calls to action, like postcard writing or call storms or something like that, we are able to target our own members with these alert mails, which we get a very good reaction from. These people, by the way, are opting into the males, and it's not an annoyance. It's a way they can help.
It's an interest, yeah.
Yeah, they say, "Oh yes, I want to be an activist." It's an easy way to be an activist, actually.
It's true. So, do you want to talk a little bit about the relationship between the Global Women's Caucus and the Country Committee caucuses?
I would just like to finish off
sure.
on ERA. Well, you asked about the dates, and it was actually originally put up in 71 and put to the Senate in 72.
Yeah.
And then the original set for the ratification deadline was in March of 79. So this has been going on for an awful long time.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And in 1977, 35 of the necessary states had already ratified it.
Wow.
So we've had recently the other 3 states come in.
Wow.
And we're still waiting, as I said, for it to be placed into the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's what amazes me, because I've been hearing this discussion my entire life, and I just sort of feel like, aren't we done? Hasn't this amendment been passed? And no, it hasn't.
Well, we can blame John Adams, who didn't listen to his wife.
Why can we blame John Adams?
Yes, tell us more.
Abigail Adams said to remember the women, and he forgot this. So we've been working on this long before 1971.
Yes. Because he just didn't think to put that in the Constitution right at the beginning. And
Right.
Right.
They thought it was implied.
They thought it was implied, right.
Oh, it really? Okay.
Well, in fact, I remember being very young and hearing my mother talk about that. It's a related thing. My grandfather was a judge, and my mother's position was, having learned from him, you don't create legislation that duplicates something that already exists. And to her mind, the Constitution already acknowledged women as being equal to men. But it didn't take her many years to come around to the other point of view. But that was her initial reaction. Why do we need this? We're already protected.
Right.
Well, if I understand it correctly, it was actually the Republicans who were backing the legislation back in the 70s.
Interesting.
And it wasn't at all a partisan issue. And Christina, was it the Nixon administration?
Right.
I think it was. Yeah.
It was.
So,
yes, it was, and it was a nonpartisan issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't understand how it became partisan, but so often everything goes back again very often to the abortion rights. So somehow they want to connect abortion with the ERA, even though they're totally unrelated issues.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah.
They're both women's issues.
I was about to say it's about the patriarchy. It's all about the patriarchy.
Yes.
Don't give those women any more power than they already have. My goodness.
Oh, think of the trouble we'll be in.
I know. Gee, imagine if the other half of the world had as much power as the ones who are in power now. Heaven forbid. So,
Crazy times.
It's a power issue. It's about the patriarchy. It's about power. So anyway, we have a lot of work to do in the future. That's what I said.
Well, it's interesting about that. A sort of little bit of situation here in Ottawa. So Rach and I are the co-chairs, and my term is up, but because of the way that our rules are written, it has to be an individual who is not or who is a male who will become the other co-chair, and we're having a hard time finding an individual who identifies as a male who wants to be the co-chair.
Or non-binary. But yeah, I mean, the fact is most of our active volunteers are women.
We have exactly that same problem in Germany, in DA Germany as well. It is, we've had that exact situation where there are 5 or 6 very qualified women waiting in line, and everybody's looking under the chairs looking for a guy.
For a guy, yeah. Although I have to say, I won't be sorry if David has to step in again, but but it is an interesting imbalance.
Mm-hmm. But it is an anomaly. Typically it's the women who are in the minority. It's just a DA thing. I don't know why. Do you know why? I don't know. It's a fact.
It happens in some spheres. I'm also a children's writer, and the world of children's literature is predominantly female, not entirely, but at least the people you see at conferences, mostly women. Yeah. So I think it's
Well,
really specific.
as an opera singer, I never had to compete with a guy. I must say.
Although there's some really amazing countertenors.
not my range. Anyway,
that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, I don't even know what a countertenor is.
All right. You want to ask me about, I don't know, ask me about my plans or where our caucus is going.
Well, I am interested in the relationship between the Global Women's Caucus and the Country Committee Women's Caucus.
Right. You know, that is an important issue. Rachel, you put your finger on my primary job for this year. Because
oh my goodness, how did I do that?
Yes, because I will admit, I don't feel like that is working as well as it could. I feel like the Global Women's Caucus is generating a lot of material, a lot of action. We're, to continue the pizza metaphor, we're very busy in our pizza kitchen producing pizza all the time, but it's not always getting to the customer,
right?
Interesting.
The country level, especially the chapter level. And because we have a lot on our plate, and we have Christina is our volunteer coordinator and is pulling in more volunteers. Part of it is a lack of volunteers, which means, we're all doing multiple jobs, but we are making an effort this year, since it's not an election year. Our focus this year especially will be on our own membership and our own organization and building up the country level caucuses, the Women's Caucus. That's my goal for the coming year. We have just about a year to do it, and then we have to go back into GOTV, get out the vote gear.
Exactly. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I want to make that connection between the global and the country level a little better, especially since we're all online all the time. There was a time when there was where coordination was very difficult because everyone was doing live events and the time zones, it was, you couldn't fly to all these events, but now we could. So,
True.
Yeah.
In one way, that's how COVID has also helped us with this virus, that we've gotten used to doing things online. So Ann and I were just talking about, we have an overwhelming amount of caucus meetings, almost to the point of I can't say it's too much, but there is an awful lot, because people realize that this is a media that they can now use. Mm-hmm. We can Zoom every day if you want.
If you want.
Right. You can go into Democrats Abroad and look under events, and you'll find all the events that are going on in Democrats Abroad.
That's right.
And there are tons of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you're really only limited by time zone.
Exactly. Instead of thinking at the country level, the country committee level, you think in time zone. Which time zone it works for me?
Right.
But I think there is, I think globally we're all exhausted with online meetings, because those of us who are also working from home, I do my day job, and it's also online all the time, unfortunately. So.
Yeah, there is definitely a fatigue associated with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But on the other hand, it has gotten people to connect in a way that we wouldn't have been able to, since many of us can't leave our homes.
True.
Or leave our home for a limited period of time.
Yeah, that's right. And thank goodness for that. And we have, and I think Christina can probably confirm this, but our volunteer pool has grown quite a lot, because people find themselves at home. And even though they have children at home, or they're working from home, they can find a precious little slice of their time pie to donate to us, because they're home anyway. You know what I mean?
Yes, it's true.
From pizzas to pies. Yeah.
I have this thing about food. I don't know.
Oh, I love it. Yes, keep using these comparisons.
Yeah.
we just put out a call for volunteers a couple of weeks ago, and we immediately got 42 people.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. So, sometimes I get overwhelmed by the number of highly competent women that we have. And you could say, well, why am I overwhelmed? I'm talking about, an author who's been nominated for a Pulitzer Prize, or and another woman studying for her PhD, and her thesis is going to be on contraception in the 20th century in female literature. I mean, just amazing things that these women are doing.
Amazing.
So we're getting some extremely talented people.
And
so that's why it's almost overwhelming, because I think, oh my goodness, these are such competent people.
I would love to praise the diversity of our volunteers at this point, because as Christina said, we get some really high-powered experts and real amazing people, or retired professionals who have been at their fancy, high-paying careers for many years, and then they're willing to share this experience and share their networking skills and make those phone calls for us. But at the same time, another thing that we can really help with, and I think COVID has caused a lot of this, we are getting some amazing, really fresh graduates with their shiny new degrees, fresh out of some wonderful university. Right. They're looking for their first chance to sort of dig in and prove themselves, make a few lines for their resume. But they have those cutting edge skills and this knowledge of the real world that some of our retired experts don't have.
That's amazing.
So I like to put those kinds of people together in teams, so that this senior, seasoned professional woman is mentoring essentially some of these young, really brilliant young people. So it works beautifully.
But maybe being mentored in turn by them when it comes to their digital engagement or something like that.
You've got it. Exactly. So, yes, some of my lovely expert women really don't know how to write a mail of their own. They're used to having staff, and I won't divulge some of the insecurities that some of these women have shared with me. But
make me immediately curious.
Yeah, well, the digital world is still a new frontier for some of these expert women.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so it's wonderful to pair them with some hotshot young PhD student from Oxford or Harvard or something like that. It really works well.
Fabulous. So what about the participation of men? I know there are men who belong to the Women's Caucus. So how active do they become?
I would like more. We have a few. I have to say, during all those women's marches, you always saw the guys supporting. There were lots of guys in our marches. They were often carrying the purses and the coats and the water bottles and the backpacks and things, but they were there.
Or the babies.
Or pushing the strollers, exactly. We do have men, and we mentioned that that all issues are women's issues, and that we have these action teams. There's an action team that I have been talking about with one of the men in our group. Since it's still just in the theoretical stage, I won't mention who it is, but I don't know if you've heard of an organization called He for She, which I think Emma Watson is part of. Yeah. This person I've been talking to is interested in some kind of a mentoring program for boys about women's issues, and helping with that side of it, the men mentoring boys, or men helping men, or discussion groups. There's some really great organizations that he's called my attention to, where there are men, male groups discussing how can we help, and in fact discussing exactly the points we've been touching on about why should the ERA matter to guys, and what's the big deal about the violence against women. How should I be involved in that, and how can I be an ally? So that is, we don't know what to call the group. Maybe somebody on this in this conversation can help me name it, but I don't know, being an ally, or He for She is a kind of a catchy name. Anyway, that's one of the things that I would like to expand on. I mentioned that membership and working on our own group is part of my goal. My New Year's resolution is to turn my attention to our organization itself. And that's on my to-do list, to try and get more men involved in our group.
That sounds fabulous.
One of my little New Year's resolution is also to try to find more male volunteers. Mm-hmm. Strangely enough, they don't so much write to us. but I can try to solicit some, which I have done. And it's a good that we do get men involved.
Well, it's interesting with the caucuses because, especially if you come in as a new DA member and you see these caucuses, it's easy to think, oh, that's for women, or I can't belong to the Black Caucus because I'm not Black. But my first national meeting, Angela Fobbs, the chair of the Black Caucus, I don't remember what she was talking about. Maybe she was just introducing the caucus to the meeting, but she explicitly said, we want everyone to join.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I assume that's true for most of the caucuses, but it's easy to be intimidated by the idea that I don't belong.
I was even invited to join the youth caucus recently, even though I'm way past the age, but that's absolutely true. If you're not in that that particular group, you can be an ally. I'm learning to be an ally within the Black Caucus. I am a member of the Black Caucus, and we had a fabulous event a while back on how to be. The title of my presentation was how to be an ally, right. and that is so important because nobody can do it by themselves. I'm a member of the LGBT caucus, and we're except for COVID, we had planned a wonderful event around women in the LGBT movement and. Rainbow families and that sort of thing. Really, really interesting. We didn't get to do it, but we're hoping maybe next year.
Yes.
or we'll do it online. If we have to, we'll do it online. But
no, I have high hopes for 2022. A lot of this stuff will be back on track.
Yeah. So, but there'll definitely be a pizza, an event in the box on that topic. Because to be serious for a moment, there are some issues that are not well discussed online on a giant Zoom conference with 100 people.
No, not at all. Some
topics we are so sensitive that we want small groups, preferably live, but if it has to be, then at least smaller local online conversations. And we feel that some of the topics we want to discuss within this rainbow families and the coming out and the, how do the parents support that, especially if one parent is in on it and the other's not. There's a lot of issues to discuss. And we felt that in-person conversations would be the best way to go there.
That makes sense. Yeah,
absolutely.
Is there anything either of you would like to touch on that we haven't gotten to?
I was going to mention a new project that we're cooking up in our kitchen. That we mentioned the whole thing about our action teams and what they're doing with all of their events. What we're hoping to address as well is a little bit more input on the actual policy making that goes on, because I've since the beginning I've been a believer that all of us as Democrats Abroad members are part of a vast laboratory of policy experiments in all our host countries. We're real life experts on a myriad really of different ways that other countries are trying to address the same set of problems.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
So I feel that makes us a really valuable resource to our own policymakers at home who are writing the legislation. So we're hoping to start a project where we'll be pulling in the stories and the testimonies, so to speak, from our members on various issues, like how is this country dealing with equal rights or any of our issues, the whole long list of our issues. And we'd like to package those for our legislators. And in support of our legislators, especially the women that we're getting to know through our events, we'll be tracking that legislation as well. And we're hoping to have input on the policy making, input on the legislation through these stories, and the ability to testify if we need to. And then we'll be tracking legislation and standing ready for support with call storms or postcard writing or whatever else, or hosting panel discussions, whatever our team of blue women legislators in Congress need from us. But that's a new thing. And that's something we're going to go for this year. We're going to give it a try.
That's
Love it.
fabulous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm fortunate that I live in a country where women are probably next to Iceland considered to be the most equal to men. And it shows in the government, because when they got Gro Harlem Brundtland in the 80s to have almost an all-female cabinet, that's when many of the rules were changed. Long maternity leaves became an actuality. And now men have almost equal maternity leave to the women. So it's an advantage for everyone. And Norway is a perfect example of how supporting women supports the entire family.
Mm-hmm. Amazing.
Absolutely.
And we're in so many countries. We have so much to explain and input. And some of our countries are not doing so well.
Right.
Germany is making some, they had a lot of goals, a lot of fancy goals for the climate, and they're stumbling here and there. And I would like our members to be able to have some input on where Germany is stumbling. And maybe we can, with our U.S. legislation, maybe we can avoid some of those.
Yes, that global knowledge of things that the reason why it didn't work, and let's share that with each other.
Right. Yeah. Some things work and some things don't. That's why I call it a laboratory. It's an experiment.
Yeah. That's a great way to look at it.
And speaking of food,
I'm getting hungry.
Yeah, I know. Lunch? Is it lunchtime?
Food is so important.
but we do have blogs also in our Global Women's Caucus. And I believe the climate action team is going to be starting a blog. They're not going to try to convince people to become vegetarians, but to reduce their meat consumption.
Right.
So they'll be coming up with sort of like little cookbooks and some ideas of what you can do of preparing meatless meals. So that's something to look forward to.
Well,
Definitely. Yeah.
now, before we wrap this up, has everybody said everything they need to say?
Well, I would just like to add that we also have a lot of fun in the Global Women's Caucus.
We do. They've become my best friends.
That's true. We even had a little skit once when we were in Athens. We all portrayed a goddess and related it to our role in Democrats Abroad.
I love that.
That's right. One of our women who is a writer wrote a script entitled "The Goddesses Were the First Feminists," and it was hysterical. It was a comedy, and we performed it. Very funny, and it's true. Those goddesses really had it on the men. They gave them, a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
So which goddesses did you two portray? I have to know.
Oh,
I was the goddess of Mother Nature. Yes.
I was the moderator. I didn't get to be a goddess.
You were in the conductor role again.
Exactly, Rachel. I was the conductor, but we
The
had
goddess of moderation.
Yeah, but the goddess of moderation. There you go. But it's true. From the stories of these goddesses, you can really see they were very strong women.
Absolutely.
So when we get together, we have a good time.
Yeah, that's what it should be.
It's not all work.
Well, the tone is set at the top.
Yes, that's true.
I like to have fun, so yeah.
Exactly. So clearly you do.
All right. And it really, I just have to say, we all know that Democrats Abroad is a 100% volunteer organization. And for all of us, this really, truly is a labor of love, isn't it? We give our time, we give our energy in this labor of love. And it might sound corny to say so, but it's because we believe we can create a better world.
Yes.
That's it. That's why we do all of this. And it's fun.
And Christina, thank you so much for a really delightful and fun conversation. Yeah. I'm Rachel Oigster with David Schellenberg in Ottawa, Canada. Thank you for listening to Democrats Abroad, the Blue Vote Cafe.